The dust of centuries hung heavy over the Grand Opera, a forgotten Victorian theatre whose echoes of applause had long faded. Now, a new kind of spectacle graced its stage, the mystery of a dancing shadow that, like a choreographed phantom, terrified the restoration crew. Was it the spectre of a lost ballerina, whose ghostly steps still sought a final act, or was there something more sinister lurking behind the faded curtains? The stage awaited, and Mystery Inc. was about to discover that sometimes, the greatest show of all is what hides in the shadows. The invitation to Mystery Incorporated seemed, at first glance, just another case of superstition and overactive imagination. The Grand Opera, a majestic Victorian theatre nestled in the heart of a city with more secrets than streets, was slated to reopen after decades of abandonment. However, the restoration team, initially excited at the prospect of reviving its former glory, was now on the verge of collapse. The reason? A dancing shadow. Fred, with his determined chin and perpetual planning, analyzed the theater's blueprint, marking strategic points for future traps. An old theater, huh? Perfect for a good old projection trick, he muttered, more to himself than to the team. Velma, meanwhile, was already engrossed in piles of dusty books and articles about the Grand Opera's history and local legends. Her glasses slipped down her nose as she read about the disappearance of a famous ballerina, Elara, decades ago, whose last steps were taken on that very stage. Legend has it that Elara was the embodiment of grace, but her last solo was interrupted by an eternal silence, Velma informed, her voice grave. Since then, whispers of her ghostly presence have haunted the corridors. Daphne, with her keen intuition, walked the stage, trying to feel the place's energy. She observed the dust marks and remnants of old sets, imagining the life that once pulsed there. The dancing shadow isn't just an image, one of the restorers, a grizzled man named Arthur, explained with a trembling voice. It dances. A strange, almost mesmerizing choreography that seems to float on the walls and stage, always at dusk. His eyes, still marked by fear, swept the stage, as if expecting the apparition at any moment. Fred, hearing the description, adjusted his mental traps. A shadow that dances? That complicates things a bit. He imagined invisible strings, strategically placed spotlights, but knew that if it was a ghost, the mechanics would be very different. Scooby and Shaggy, meanwhile, had already sniffed their way to the backstage area, where the promise of a forgotten snack was more appealing than any mystery. They rummaged through dusty dressing rooms, opening drawers and cupboards in the hope of finding a lost biscuit or a piece of sandwich. You know, Shaggy, we could live here after the mystery's solved, Scooby pondered, his mouth full of a seemingly petrified birthday cake they found in what looked like the old ballerina's makeup room. Lots of places to hide food, and we could put on our own comedy show. Shaggy, chewing what seemed like dry bread, nodded vigorously. The Mystery Incorporated team decided to spend the first night in the theater to observe the phenomenon up close. As night fell, a heavy atmosphere enveloped the Grand Opera. The wind howled through the window cracks, and the creaking sounds of wood created an eerie symphony. Velma prepared her measuring equipment, while Fred checked the installation of some infrared cameras. Daphne, her eyes fixed on the stage, tried to decipher the choreography Arthur had described. Suddenly, a slight chill breeze swept through the theater, and the lights flickered. A dark blotch began to form on the walls, growing, taking the shape of a slender human figure. It floated, stretched, and then, to everyone's horror, began to dance. It wasn't an ordinary dance, but a series of fluid and ethereal movements, almost as if the very air was contorting into a performance. It was the dancing shadow. The figure seemed to observe the empty audience, as if seeking recognition, a memory. The restoration team, who had promised to stay, fled in a panic, their screams echoing through the corridors. Fred activated one of his traps, a net that was supposed to deploy automatically, but the shadow simply floated through it, as if it were smoke. Velma tried to record measurements, but her instruments seemed to go wild with erratic readings. Daphne tried to follow the shadow's movements, but it was fast and unpredictable. Scooby and Shaggy, who had promised to help Fred monitor the cameras, were huddled behind a pile of scenery, trembling with fear. The shadow, after a few minutes of its ghostly performance, dissolved as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only the oppressive silence of the theater and the persistent feeling of something inexplicable. "This is no ordinary light trick," Fred admitted, his trap plans seeming inadequate. "It's something more elaborate, or, it really is a ghost." Velma, her brow furrowed, examined the confused data from her instruments. Legends about Elara speak of unrequited love and an unfulfilled desire for recognition. Perhaps the shadow is the manifestation of her art and her pain. Daphne, still feeling the strange vibration of the stage, murmured, "This dance, it seems to have a message, a story that needs to be told." The first encounter with the dancing shadow had left more questions than answers, and Mystery Inc. realized that this case would be different from all the others. They would have to delve deep into the Grand Opera's past and unravel not just a mystery, but a legacy. With each ghostly movement, the shadow seemed to taunt them, challenging them to decipher its enigma before the theater, and perhaps themselves, were forever consumed by its ethereal presence. The following morning brought renewed determination to Mystery Incorporated. The encounter with the dancing shadow had solidified the idea that the mystery was more complex than a simple lighting trick. Velma, with Daphne's support, dedicated herself to more in-depth research in the city archives. They visited the municipal library, an equally old and dusty building, where they found faded records, newspaper clippings, and even some Grand Opera playbills. Elara's name appeared frequently, always accompanied by adjectives like divine, incomparable, and ethereal. Newspapers of the time reported Elara's disappearance as a tragic event, shrouded in speculation. There was no body, no concrete lead. The police at the time had concluded she fled, but the city's theater community insisted Elara would never abandon her art. A footnote in an old article caught Velma's eye. Rumors persisted of a jealous rival, a talented but envious choreographer named Silas, who harbored an obsession with Elara and her movements. Daphne, with a sparkle in her eye, commented, "A jealous rival is always a good start. What if he trapped her somewhere in the theater so she could never dance again?" Fred, with the help of Scooby and Shaggy, who were more interested in looking for lost snacks than clues, began to search every inch of the theater for secret passages, trapdoors, or anything that could explain the shadow's emergence. They measured the walls, checked the floor, and even ventured into the cramped spaces above the stage. "This place is a labyrinth of boards and cobwebs," Fred complained, as Scooby barked at an indistinct shadow in a dark corner. "It's harder than setting a trap for an invisible crocodile." Scooby and Shaggy, meanwhile, were more concerned with where they would find the next biscuit. They sniffed the floor, their muzzles and noses in the air, like hunting dogs, and even smelled the old scenery boxes, hopeful. While exploring backstage, Scooby accidentally kicked a loose piece of plaster wall. Behind it, a small hidden compartment was revealed, containing a leather-bound book and a set of intricate drawings. The book was Elara's diary. The yellowed pages, written in elegant calligraphy, revealed not only the ballerina's thoughts but also detailed sketches of choreographies and notes on ancient theater lighting techniques she had learned on her travels through Europe. Velma examined the drawings with fascination. "These are shadow lighting techniques from the era. Complex projections, using lenses and mirrors," she explained. "It seems Elara was an innovator for her time." The diary also contained veiled mentions of a secret that tormented her, something related to a specific performance, the Shadow's last act, which Elara planned to present before her disappearance. Silas's name appeared repeatedly, but not as a rival, but rather as a close collaborator and dedicated friend. "This changes everything," Daphne exclaimed. Silas wasn't an enemy, but someone important to her. As Velma and Daphne delved into the diary, Fred was on the main stage, examining the old spotlights and projectors. Many of them were in ruins, but some seemed to be in surprisingly good condition. He noticed a complex system of mirrors and lenses, hidden behind heavy curtains, that seemed to be designed to create extraordinarily vivid light and shadow effects. This is interesting, he murmured, activating one of the mechanisms. A faint beam of light crossed the stage, creating an irregular blotch on the wall. It was a start. Scooby and Shaggy, in their tireless search for food, ventured into the prop room, a chaotic and dusty place, filled with strange objects and theatrical costumes. They found an old ventriloquist's dummy, with glass eyes that seemed to follow them. The dummy was sitting in a dusty box. While trying to push it out of the way, Shaggy accidentally bumped into one of the boxes containing the dummy. A hollow sound echoed, and a part of the floor creaked. Intrigued, they poked the spot and discovered an almost invisible trapdoor. Inside the trapdoor, there was no food, but rather a rusty metal chest. With a combined effort, they managed to open it. Inside, there was a set of old parchments and a silver medallion with the symbol of a dancing ballerina. The parchments, written in elegant calligraphy, were musical scores and detailed instructions for a complex choreography. The medallion, in turn, seemed to be an amulet. When Scooby and Shaggy showed their discoveries, the team gathered. The scores coincided with Alara's notes on The Shadow's last act. Velma realized that the choreographic instructions and scores had some unusual marks, small symbols that repeated at specific moments. It seems Alara and Silas were developing something much more complex than a simple play, Velma observed, her eyes scanning the parchments. These symbols, they repeat. Almost like coordinates. As night approached, the tension in the theater increased. With each shadow cast by the outside lights, the team flinched. They knew the dancing shadow could appear at any moment. Fred, still intrigued by the lighting system, noticed that one of the mirrors was tilted strangely, almost as if it had been deliberately adjusted for a specific purpose. He fiddled with it, and the beam of light moved. The medallion, when held by Daphne, began to emit a faint, almost imperceptible glow. The dancing shadow, which appeared moments later, seemed stronger, its movements more defined. But this time, Daphne felt that the dance was not one of terror, but of desperation. She realized that the shadow was not just a scare, but a message, a story to be deciphered. The shadow, instead of floating randomly, now seemed to follow a sequence of movements, as if it were trying to show something. The echo of Alara's memory was beginning to manifest in an unexpected way, and Mystery Incorporated was about to discover that the Grand Opera stage held deeper secrets than any legend. With Alara's diary and the parchments of the Secret Symphony in hand, Mystery Incorporated delved into a detailed analysis. Velma, with her analytical mind, tried to decipher the enigmatic symbols on the scores. They're not traditional musical notes, she pondered, pointing to a sequence of dots and lines on the parchment. They look more like a code, or perhaps a set of coordinates. Fred, hearing the mention of coordinates, rushed to get the theater map. If they're coordinates, then they must point to somewhere specific in here. While Velma and Fred worked, Daphne, with her sensitivity, dedicated herself to studying the choreography of the Secret Symphony. Alara's notes were detailed, describing each movement with an almost mystical precision. She describes movements that seem to activate something, Daphne murmured, trying to reproduce some of the steps. As if each gesture had a purpose beyond the dance. The movements were fluid and complex, involving projections and interaction with light. The medallion, which still emitted a faint glow in Daphne's hands, seemed to vibrate in sync with the movements. Scooby and Shaggy, who had discovered the trapdoor and the chest, were now more interested in exploring other hiding places in the theater. They ventured into the machinery room, a dark and noisy place, with rusty gears and hanging pulleys. The smell of old oil hung in the air. Scooby, sniffing a peculiar scent, led Shaggy to a section of the room that seemed to have been sealed for a long time. There was a series of levers and buttons, most of them unused, but one of them, a large copper button, had a strange sheen, as if it had been polished recently. Beside it, a small panel with a series of symbols. Velma, examining the symbols on the machinery room panel, realized that they corresponded to the symbols found on Alara's scores. "This isn't an ordinary symphony," she exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with the discovery. It's a mechanism. A mechanical orchestra, perhaps. Fred, hearing the word mechanism, hurried to the machinery room. He examined the levers and buttons, noting that some of them were connected to a complex system of pulleys that extended behind the walls and went up to the stage. Elara and Silas were building something big here, he said, amazed. Something that combines art and technology. Daphne then realized the connection. What if the secret symphony isn't just a dance, but a sequence of movements to activate these mechanisms? She took the medallion and, following the instructions on the scores, began to execute the choreography's movements. As she moved, the medallion glowed more intensely. The moment Daphne executed a specific turn, one of the symbols on the machinery room panel lit up. Scooby, curious, pressed the corresponding button. A loud creak echoed through the theater, and a part of the scenery on the stage began to move slowly, revealing a hidden opening. The dancing shadow, which had appeared on stage when Daphne began to dance, intensified. Its movements became more precise, stronger, and it seemed to guide Daphne through the choreography, almost as if it were demonstrating the steps. It was a collaborative dance, between past and present, between legend and reality. The shadow, now, seemed less threatening and more like a guide, a mentor. The opening in the scenery revealed a secret chamber, a hidden space behind the stage, which did not appear on any theater plan. Inside, there was a series of giant mirrors, lenses, and a complex projection system. It was an illusion machine, designed to create impressive visual effects. Fred approached, his eyes gleaming with the discovery. "This is the source of the dancing shadow," he exclaimed. "It's not a ghost, it's an advanced optical illusion." However, the machine was inoperable, with many of its components damaged. There was a metallic gleam in the center of the machine, where a small compartment was visible. Velma, examining the spot, realized that the compartment was the exact shape of the medallion. Upon inserting it, the machine clicked and a low hum began to echo. The dancing shadow, on stage, stopped dancing and fixed its gaze on the chamber. It was as if the shadow was waiting for the machine to come to life. The central dilemma of the story, which was once the mystery of the dancing shadow, now transformed into another: the machine needed to be fixed. But for what? The shadow was not just a ghost, but a projection from a machine. But if the machine was broken, how did the shadow appear? Was the shadow a manifestation of something deeper? And what were Elara and Silas really trying to achieve with this secret symphony? What did the ballerina want to reveal? The answer seemed closer than ever, but it would require more than just solving a mystery. It would require a deep understanding of Elara and Silas's legacy, and the power of art to transcend time. The Mystery Incorporated team was about to become part of a forgotten performance, where the secret symphony was not just music, but the key to unraveling the truth behind the dancing shadow. With the discovery of the secret chamber and the illusion machine, Mystery Incorporated felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief at finally having a logical explanation for the dancing shadow, and frustration at having to fix a complex contraption in a haunted theater. Fred, in his element, began inspecting the machine, identifying damaged parts and circuits that needed repair. "This is going to take a while," he grumbled, wiping grease from one of the mirrors, but with a satisfied gleam in his eyes. "But for sure, it's not a ghost. Just an old stage trick machine." Velma, however, was not entirely convinced. While Fred worked on the machine, she continued to study Elara's diary and the secret symphony parchments. There was something in the ballerina's notes that bothered her, a feeling that the machine was only part of a larger plan. She focused on the last entries in Elara's diary, which seemed increasingly urgent. Elara didn't just want to impress, she wanted to reveal something, Velma read aloud to Daphne. Something that kept her prisoner, even when she was free on stage. Elara's words were enigmatic, full of metaphors about shadows and hidden truths. Daphne, in turn, continued to practice the movements of the secret symphony, medallion in hand. She felt that each step, each gesture, held a deeper meaning. As she danced, the dancing shadow, which still appeared at dusk, seemed to react to her movements, almost as if trying to communicate. The shadow not only imitated her steps but also added nuances, small variations that Daphne perceived as messages. "She's teaching me," Daphne exclaimed, her eyes gleaming. "The shadow is guiding me, showing me what Alara really meant." Scooby and Shaggy, of course, were on a self-assigned mission to find the best snack room in the theater. They explored every nook and cranny, always hoping to find a culinary treasure. While sniffing out the scent of a cupcake, they stumbled upon a set of old costumes in one of their backstage forays. Trying on a large, dusty hat, Shaggy felt something hard inside it. It was a small, old voice recorder, with an almost imperceptible recording cartridge. Fred, examining it, managed to activate it with difficulty. Alara's voice, fragile and terrified, echoed through the dressing room. He found me, the Baron. I can't reveal the truth. Silas, flee, he's coming for you." The recording ended abruptly, with the sound of a struggle and a muffled scream. It was the final proof, the confession of the Baron's crime. The dancing shadow, upon appearing that night, was more agitated than ever. Daphne, following the shadow's subtle instructions, danced the secret symphony with hypnotizing precision. With each movement, the illusion machine in the secret chamber seemed to respond, with lights flickering and gears slowly turning. Fred, next to the machine, tried to fix the damaged parts, guided by Velma's tips and the shadow's reactions. The lights and shadows on stage became more vivid, and the figure of the dancing shadow became more defined, almost translucent. At the climax of Daphne's dance, the dancing shadow performed a final movement, pointing to a specific spot on the stage. At the same time, a last symbol on the machinery room panel lit up. Scooby, excited, pressed the button. A hidden mechanism activated, and a part of the stage opened, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, to everyone's shock, was an old wooden box with an engraved crest, the Baron's crest. Upon opening the box, they found a second diary, this one written by Silas, and a set of photographic negatives. Silas's diary confirmed the Baron's obsession with the theater and his desire to manipulate Alara. The photographs were images of the Baron's falsified documents and shady dealings, irrefutable proof of his illegal activities. Alara had planned to reveal this evidence during the performance of the Secret Symphony, using the illusion machine to project the images to the audience. "She didn't disappear," Velma exclaimed, her voice choked. "She was silenced." The shadow, upon seeing the revealed evidence, grew brighter, and for an instant, seemed to take on Alara's form, an expression of gratitude and relief on her ethereal face. She had waited decades for her truth to be revealed. Fred, now with the machine in operation, realized that the dancing shadow was not just an illusion. It was Alara's legacy, a message waiting to be deciphered, a final dance to expose the truth. And now, Mystery Inc. had the evidence and the machine to finally bring to light what Alara tried to reveal. The truth was lurking, and the shadow's next appearance would be the stage for its final revelation. With the evidence in hand and the illusion machine partially restored, Mystery Incorporated knew it was time to set the stage for the grand revelation. Fred, with his engineering talent, worked tirelessly to fix the machine, using Silas's blueprints and Alara's own notes. Damaged parts were replaced, mirrors were realigned, and rusty mechanisms were lubricated. "It's almost ready," he announced, covered in grease but with a satisfied gleam in his eyes. "The dancing shadow will have its big moment." Velma and Daphne, meanwhile, dedicated themselves to organizing the evidence against the Baron. Silas's letters, the photographic negatives, and Alara's own diary entries fit together like pieces of a macabre puzzle. They revealed a scheme of fraud, extortion, and money laundering, all orchestrated by the Baron, who used the Grand Opera as a front for his illegal operations. "He was afraid Alara would expose him," Velma explained. "That's why he stopped her." Daphne practiced the Secret Symphony with the medallion, now more confident and connected to Alara's choreography. She realized that, in addition to activating the illusion machine, the dance also seemed to be a tribute to the artist, a final farewell. The dancing shadow, which appeared during her rehearsals, now seemed less like a guide and more like a stage partner, its movements fluid and graceful. They danced in perfect synchronicity, a fusion between past and present. Scooby and Shaggy, of course, couldn't be left out of the action. While the rest of the team prepared for the revelation, they were on a self-assigned, snack reconnaissance mission throughout the theater. In one of their forays into the dressing rooms, they stumbled upon a set of old costumes. While trying on a large, dusty hat, Shaggy felt something hard inside it. It was a small, old voice recorder, with an almost imperceptible recording cartridge. Fred, examining it, managed to activate it with difficulty. Alara's voice, fragile and terrified, echoed through the dressing room. He found me, the Baron. I can't reveal the truth. Silas, flee, he's coming for you. The recording ended abruptly, with the sound of a struggle and a muffled scream. It was the final proof, the confession of the Baron's crime. The night of the revelation arrived. Mystery Inc. decided to invite the press and local police to a special performance at the Grand Opera, promising to unravel the mystery of the dancing shadow. The news spread quickly, and the theater, once empty, was now packed with curious journalists and skeptical law enforcement officers. The atmosphere was one of tension and expectation. When the stage lights came on, Daphne, wearing a costume that resembled Alara's, ascended the stage. The medallion, clasped around her neck, glowed brightly. The audience murmured, unsure what to expect. Suddenly, the dancing shadow appeared on the walls and stage, its movements graceful and ethereal. Daphne began to dance the secret symphony, her movements echoing those of the shadow. As she danced, Fred, in the secret chamber, activated the illusion machine. The projections on the wall and stage were not just of the dancing shadow. The machine, now in full operation, began to project clear images of the Baron's falsified documents, incriminating letters, and photographs that proved his illegal activities. Alara's recorded voice was amplified, echoing through the theater, telling the story of her persecution and the Baron's plan to silence her. The audience was stunned. Journalists scribbled in their notebooks, and police officers exchanged glances, surprised by the revelation. The dancing shadow, in sync with Daphne's dance and the projections, seemed to dance Alara's story, the pain of her betrayal, the courage of her attempt to expose the truth, and the desperation of her silence. It pointed to the documents, to Alara's voice, to each piece of evidence. It was a dance of truth, a visual and auditory symphony that revealed Alara's legacy. At the climax of the performance, the dancing shadow pointed to a VIP box in the center of the theater, where the Baron, disguised and with an expression of panic, tried to flee. The police acted quickly, apprehending him. The audience erupted in applause, and the dancing shadow, after its last and most important performance, began to fade. But this time, it was not a frightening disappearance, but rather a farewell, a feeling of a mission accomplished. Alara's silhouette, for a brief instant, seemed to hover over the stage, her eyes fixed on Daphne, a smile of gratitude. The illusion machine stopped, and the dancing shadow disappeared completely, leaving behind only the stage light and the reverberation of truth. Mystery Incorporated had solved the mystery, but they had also given voice to a silenced artist, and justice to a forgotten legacy. The Grand Opera was no longer haunted. It was free to tell Alara's story, not as a legend of terror, but as a testament to courage and the strength of art. The theater, now, was ready to reopen, not just as a stage for shows, but as a memorial to the ballerina who danced the truth out of the shadows. The Baron's arrest marked the end of a dark chapter in the Grand Opera's history. The news of his apprehension, based on the evidence revealed by Mystery Incorporated, spread like wildfire, restoring Alara's and Silas's reputations. The theater, once seen as a haunted place, was now a symbol of justice and the persistence of truth. The restoration team, who had fled in panic, returned with new vigor, inspired by Elara's story. Fred, proud of his illusion machine, spent the following days refining its mechanisms, ensuring it worked perfectly, not to scare, but to enchant. He and Velma had developed a plan to use the machine in future grand opera productions, to create impressive and educational visual effects. Elara's machine will be a legacy, Fred explained, as he tightened the last screws. It will serve art, just as Elara wished. Velma, meanwhile, dedicated herself to writing a book about the history of Elara, Silas, and the Baron, detailing Mystery Incorporated's investigation and the legacy of the Dancing Shadow. Her book, The Shadow's Last Act, The Truth Behind the Legend, became a bestseller, and the proceeds were allocated to the restoration of the Grand Opera and the creation of a scholarship program for young ballerinas. Elara didn't want to be just a legend, Velma wrote in the book's dedication. She wanted her art to live and inspire. Daphne, deeply touched by Elara's story, decided to honor the ballerina in a special way. With the help of a new choreographer and members of the restoration team, she began rehearsing a new performance, a recreation of the Secret Symphony. This time, the dance would be a tribute to Elara's courage, and the medallion would be a central piece, gleaming around her neck. The choreography included the movements the dancing shadow had taught her, making it a collaboration between past and present. Scooby and Shaggy, who had found the voice recorder that sealed the Baron's fate, were declared the snack heroes. They became the theater's unofficial mascots, and the prop room, where they had found the recorder, was renamed the Scooby and Shaggy Tasting Room, with an unlimited supply of dog biscuits and sandwiches. They spent their days sniffing every corner of the theater, ensuring there were no more hidden secrets, and occasionally, helping out, with the play's rehearsals, with unexpected pirouettes and jumps. The Grand Opera's reopening was a grand event. The entire city attended, eager to witness not only the theater's restored beauty, but also Elara's story, which had finally been revealed. The Secret Symphony, performed by Daphne and a group of young ballerinas, was the highlight of the night. The illusion machine, operated by Fred, projected images of Elara and key moments of her story, intertwining the dance with the visual narrative. The audience was ecstatic. During the performance, a subtle phenomenon occurred. The moment Daphne, wearing the medallion, executed the final movement of the Secret Symphony, a faint light seemed to emanate from the stage, almost like a ghostly glow, but this time, it was not of terror, but of peace. It was Elara's presence, finally free, her art celebrated, her legacy honored. The dancing shadow did not appear, but its essence, its story, was there, permeating every step, every note. The curtain fell amidst thunderous applause. The Grand Opera had been saved, the mystery had been solved, and the truth had prevailed. Mystery Incorporated prepared for their next adventure, but the echoes of the Grand Opera and the legacy of the dancing shadow would forever remain in their memories. They had proven that sometimes, the greatest mysteries are not about ghosts, but about the hidden truths that art and time can finally reveal. The theater, now, was ready for a new beginning, where the shadows of the past did not haunt, but illuminated the path to the future. The dust of centuries had finally settled over the Grand Opera, revealing not a ghost, but the indomitable spirit of Elara. The dancing shadow, once a torment, transformed into the final act of a silenced ballerina, whose art and courage unmasked the truth hidden for decades. The theater, now free of its shadows, flourished as a beacon of justice and a stage where Elara's memory would dance eternally, proving that not even time or darkness can erase the legacy of a soul that refuses to be forgotten.